Welcome to the module on aviation noise. My name is Miriam Snelle and I'm professor in the section Aircraft Noise and Climate Effects in the Faculty of Aerospace Engineering. As you probably know, sound levels are often provided in decibel values, bringing the levels that we experience in the range between 0 and 140 to 160 dB. Considering the levels of aircraft noise, we see a steady decrease of up to 25 dBs over the years. Reason is mainly the use of high bypass ratio turbofan engines, resulting in a significant decrease in engine noise. However, the effect of these decreased noise levels is at least partially counteracted by the increase in the number of flights. When expressing the levels of aviation-induced noise, a method is needed that combines the noise levels from all aircraft during a day, month, or a year. This metric is the so-called LDEN metric. It determines the average of all single event levels. In the averaging, a penalty is applied to the levels corresponding to events in the evening and in the night. This penalty is 5 dB for events in the evening and 10 dB for events during nighttime. It is important to realize what is actually represented by changes in LDEN. As you can see in the table, a change in LDEN of 0.1 dB corresponds to a 2.3% change in the number of flight movements, whereas a 3 dB change requires either a doubling or a halving of the number of flight movements. As a final step in determining the annoyance, the share of highly annoyed people can be determined from the LDEN value in a particular area by using the so-called dose-response relation. As you can see from the plot, an LDEN of 58 dB results in 30% of the people to be highly annoyed. What you can also see is that the dose-response relation differs for the various forms of transport. Values for LDEN can be obtained through modeling and measurements. For example, around Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands, the NOMOS measurement stations have been installed, recording the noise from aircraft. In addition, models are available that provide a full overview of the LDEN values in the area around airports. In the figure, both these predictions and the measurements are shown. When considering the measurements over the years 2006 to 2019 from all NOMOS stations, a trend of decreasing noise levels is observed. The measurements indicate roughly a 0.4 dB decrease per year. Actually, we're talking about dBA levels, where the sensitivity of the human ear is accounted for. In case the fleet had not changed, this trend would indicate a decrease of 9.6% in the number of flight movements per year. However, we know that actually the number of flights in this period did change from 400,000 to 500,000. The decrease in noise levels is thus the effect of fleet renewal, where more and more aircraft are introduced that emit less noise. The trends in the fleet are visualized in the plots on the right. The main factors making the aircraft more silent are the change from 4 to 2 engines, the use of liners and improvements in lining materials to reduce the engine noise, improved aircraft geometries, and operations. Looking at the near future, there's a trend for improved modeling and measurement techniques. Regarding models, the trends are towards models that predict the noise on a component level, such as flaps, sleds, landing gear, but also the noise from the engine jet and fan. In this way, it's possible to identify the dominant noise sources in the various flight phases and work towards making these components more silent. In addition, these models can be used to determine low noise operations. Of course, these models also provide more accurate noise footprints, essential in informing the public. Regarding measurements, the trend is to go from single microphone measurements to measurements with arrays consisting of multiple microphones. These latter allow for identifying the various noise sources that contribute to the total noise level. These measurements can then be used to validate the noise models on a component level, either for full-scale aircraft in operational conditions or in wind tunnels when determining the noise for new aviation technologies. The white plane seen in the figure is such an acoustic array, where the black dots are the individual microphones. The outcomes of analyzing these array measurements you can find at the left and the right side in the figure. These are so-called acoustic images. The colors indicate the noise level of the sources. Clearly visible are the engines, but also the landing gear. Another example of the array measurements is presented here, where measurements were taken of a Cessna Skymaster. Quantifying and modeling propeller noise is highly relevant again, as propellers are expected to play an important role in future aviation technologies, due to their fuel efficiency. By using an acoustic array and proper analysis, the noise radiated by the propellers can be separated from all other noise sources, as shown in the image. Also, noise levels from ground operations are important. This example shows measurements that have been taken for the so-called taxibot. This taxibot has less emissions compared to the taxi procedures using the aircraft engines. In addition, less noise is emitted, which is beneficial for the ground personnel. Using an acoustic array ensures focus on the individual noise sources. First, a so-called spectrogram is made using the measurements from a single microphone. Such spectrogram indicates the frequency content as a function of time. Since the aircraft and taxibot are moving relative to the array, this frequency content indeed changes as a function of time, as is seen from the figure. By selecting the frequency ranges with clear signals being present, the source per frequency can be identified. Finally, all measurements are summarized in a single plot, allowing for a comparison between the taxi procedures with and without the taxibot. As you can see from this analysis, the source noise levels are significantly lower for operations with the taxibot compared to taxiing with the aircraft engines. As stated before, assessing aircraft noise for current and future technologies consists of both measurements and modeling. Examples of such new aviation technologies are new aircraft geometries, such as the flying V, or extensive use of drones. Modeling the noise sources on a component level will provide then the expected noise levels. However, also effects such as shielding of the engine noise by the geometry needs to be accounted for in order to ensure accurate modeling. The figure shows such a prediction, where blue colors indicate a decrease in levels due to the shielding of the engine noise by the airframe. Red indicates no shielding. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention.